All right. Good evening and welcome to the Neary Building Committee meeting. It is Thursday, May 15th, 2025. It is 7:03 p.m. I'm seeing 6 out of our 7 voting members present currently, as well as a number of our ex officio members here. First order of business is review of meeting minutes, and we have 2 that are ready, April 5th and May 5th. Did everyone have a chance to read those? Any comments or questions? You're okay moving them together?
Move them together.
All right, I'm going to move that we approve the April 5th and May 5th, 2025 meeting minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Denise?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
And I am I as well. All right, that's a 6-0 vote. Our next agenda item is going to be a debrief on the special town meeting and ballot votes. This will likely then merge into discussion of proposed next steps based on voting results. While there's not public comment specifically listed on our agenda, I do anticipate and intend to take any public comment as after the committee has had a chance to discuss these 2 items in conjunction with each other tonight for those of you that are here to make any comments or react to anything that we discuss. The place I'd like to start is first acknowledging the town clerk and the amazing effort that Mr. Hegarty and his team put on to not only host a special town meeting in a venue that we typically do not use for that sort of setting, but also to have an election 4 days later. And I think, as anyone knows, that office has been short-staffed due to employees that have moved to other positions in other towns leading up to this. In talking to Mr. Hegarty, the preparation has been months in the making, and regardless of what side of the vote anyone was on, I think we can all acknowledge that the efforts and coordination there have a lot to make this town proud of in terms of our ability to assemble and logistically execute on the decisions that were made both on Saturday and Tuesday. So I just wanted to take a special time to thank Jim for that. My intention tonight, unless anyone in the committee wants to take it a different direction, is not to focus on the past, but to focus on where we want to go and what our recommendations would be on where we want to go. I know there are a lot of items that we could take in dissect in any way, shape, or form in terms of the various places we've been, in terms of certain issues that have come up as part of the project or reasons for why we're here tonight. But my intention was to make this more of a forward-looking meeting unless anyone wanted to take it a different direction. So is there anyone that is opposed to that plan?
I think that's a good plan.
Okay. Before we go forward-looking, I also want to pause and thank our school administration team for what was certainly a monumental exercise to get to this point. Regardless of the vote decision last week, I think this committee certainly knows how hard each of them have worked to support not only the committee, but the community, and to also represent the educators that are in all of our buildings on a daily basis. And, one of the things, even though I said I wasn't going to go backwards, that I think is important to pause on is as we reflect on the last couple of weeks and the discussions that we've heard, whether it be at actually town meeting, whether it be at the open forums, or whether it be in other settings, I have not heard questions about the educational vision of the district, the plan of the district. And we actually really didn't hear much about the design of how that educational plan fits in. I've realized there are other elements such as cost and site and other factors that certainly weighed into the votes that were cast in the past week. But I think it's just really important to denote and remember why we all were here in the first place to try to bring forward a proposal that would pass the votes that were required at town meeting and keep that in mind as we move forward and propose next steps to the community. Pause and see if there's any other commentary on that topic. Go ahead, Roger.
Well, I don't, well, not specifically with that topic, but through the chair, and you may have been going to get there anyway. I'd like to also thank the folks at Skanska and Arrow Street. I know they weren't working for free, but they put in a lot of effort, and at some different times, and some perhaps even unrealistic response requests to assist in this project. So, and not just the folks that are on the screen, tonight, but I'm sure they can carry this back to the folks that worked with them to express appreciation for their help.
Kathy?
I was going to do the same thing, but I still want to do it, which is thank, especially specifically Jim Burrows. He was always right there, answered the phone. I think every time I called him, got answers back real quick. They're disappointed too, right? They made a big investment in this. Yeah, they got paid, but this was not, they didn't get paid what they would have gotten paid if they were just billing normal rates, whatever. So they made a big investment in this project, and I thought that they were, especially toward the end, with them talking to the MSBA and everything we asked, I thought that Jim was a real partner.
Thank you
Okay.
for that, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. All right. So with that said, I think I'm going to move into item 4, which is discussion of proposed next steps based on the voting results. The only thing we are required to do at this point is we do need to send a letter to the MSBA within 10 business days of the vote outcome. So it would be 10 business days from last Tuesday, making them aware of the voting results and providing them with a plan. The MSBA is already aware of the voting results. The superintendent and I, as well, along with Arrow Street and Skanska, did have a conversation with them already.
Who'd you talk to, Jason?
We talked to the project team that has been supporting us throughout. So it was a number of individuals that has been supporting the project that usually Jim in the Arrow Street team would have contact with as part of their review process. The conversation was short just to make sure that we were being responsive to the requirements of their process. But we did use it as an opportunity to clarify a few things, and I wanted to take the time to make sure we're all working with the same facts before we enter into any deliberation on next steps. And Greg, I would welcome any insight, or Jim, Katie, you were there as well, Larry, just to make sure that we all have the same facts as we move forward. And to be clear, anything that we discussed tonight is not a Neary Building Committee decision. It's to help inform the other elected boards in this town that will ultimately need to partner with us in terms of the official statement that comes from the town, but also helps chart the path forward of where the community wants to go based on what we've heard and seen. So most importantly, and as a reminder, we are still within our 120-day window of funding that they have already approved. I think the takeaway that I had two takeaways from the conversation. Takeaway number one is the letter doesn't need to be a detailed step plan of what we're going to do. It just needs to simply state what our next steps are, and it can be followed up by subsequent communication. a key component of that is certainly going to be getting a pulse of the community to understand where they want to go. And simply saying that we plan to survey the community over a certain period of days will be sufficient for purposes of being responsive to our required submission until we're ready to make an ultimate decision of what we intend or want to ask them to do related to the actual proposed project that's been voted on. So there is no rush to come to a decision. I think that's just an important item. If we were on day 118 of our 120 days, it would have to take a very different form. So obviously, this decision is going to involve other boards that are going to have to be required to meet in public as well. So I think everyone's aware of that. The second thing that we made sure that we got crystal clear is any iteration or alteration to the plan that they have approved, such as even the address of the site that we're proposing to do any sort of project on in the future, would take us back to the statement of interest phase, which is where we were in the 2021 timeframe. So while I realize this conversation may lead us to potential options for exploration um, in the future, I just want everyone to be working with that factual background that any sort of alteration to anything that we have put in front of them to date would set us back to that phase. There's no other interim phase. There's no other alteration that could occur. And I think that's a really important, I'll call it black and white sort of um, decision in terms of how they view these projects and how we explain other options to the community as we move forward in terms of timing, costing, etc. Greg, would you add anything to that?
No, it was a pretty simple call in terms of the pathway with MSBA.
So did they clarify that, Jason and Greg, that whatever you come back with, changing the project, for example, moving it, is not something that they've got the ability to entertain?
Correct. And I don't think that was a surprise to us based on all the statements they had made to us beforehand, but I know that that was a topic of much discussion in the open forums leading up to the meeting, as well as the actual town meeting itself. So I thought it was important to make sure that, like anything, policies and procedures do change over time, sometimes more lenient, sometimes more stringent, but it appears that has not changed. The other question that I posed to them was, I think a major theme that we heard was the community was disappointed with the lack of choice that they were given throughout the MSBA process. And I think that came across loud and clear at a variety of different spots along our path. I remind everyone that obviously this committee was certainly around, informed at the time of the statement of interest, but we follow the procedures that town's elected officials decided on in terms of submitting a statement of interest to the MSBA, and we followed their process. I'm sure some of us like parts of it better than others, but that we followed their process to the T to get to the point where we're at. So the question I posed to the MSBA is if this project were to appear in any form in the future, and there are significant obstacles that would have to um, be overcome, could there be options with a local funding only component presented at the same time? Well, they would want to see any sort of language around that. Um, they bifurcate this decision as a community that we're going to have to make as we move forward into two parts. One, obviously, there's still a project that was presented to them that they stand behind, although they realize that the community did not vote in favor of it. There may be obstacles that could or couldn't be overcome on that. I'm not asking for an opinion or offering my own opinion on that at this point in time, but that's just an option that's still on the table. So subject to the legal wording and seeing it, if the community really did decide that they want to see a few options and we wanted to pursue something without MSBA funding in any other format, different site, renovation, retrofitting, base repair to any school, whether it be Neary or anything else, uh, subject to the wording and the approval of their legal counsel, those could appear together. They're just two very different decisions, but a decision that the community could make if that's the route that we decide to go down.
Jason, I think you need to clarify what you just said. So let me spit back what I think you just said.
Sure.
They would not stand in our way of a parallel project being proposed that would not be MSBA funded. We could propose 3 other projects that had no MSBA funding at the same time as one that would be asking for MSBA funding.
That's correct. Absent, they would want to review the language to make sure it didn't contradict anything that they're involved with in the same warrant, if that was the path we took.
Did you ask them if anyone's ever done that?
I did not.
Okay, interesting.
Roger? You're on mute, Roger, but I see your hand up.
Sorry, thank you. I had the same question Kathy did. To really understand that basically the reason we're asking them this question is to make sure they don't have an issue with us almost having their project kind of presented at the same time as other projects that they wouldn't be funding. It's more of a legal question, or is it a?
Yeah, that's correct. It's just, again,
Right, they don't have anything to do with it, okay.
yeah, I think our job is to listen, and I think that was certainly a theme that was thrown out at many different points in time. Andrew, then Denise.
Jason, I don't know if they mentioned it, but I have seen them put it in some of their letters to, failed programs when they wrote in, like a Hopkinton. The MSBA stated that, if you don't want to do this project, you would have to go back and do a statement of interest, start the process over, but that they would not pay for the MSBA share of a feasibility study. That the next feasibility study would basically be completely on the town. So I don't know if they mentioned that, but I would use that as the assumption.
Really? So if you go back in with another application, you will be on the hook for the whole thing? The town would?
That was what I know they said to Hopkinton when they're failed. They said basically to perform a new feasibility study and schematic design without financial participation from the MSBA for these phases of work. So just, whatever we got, 400,000 or 300,000, whatever our reimbursement was for this.
Go ahead, Denise. You're on mute.
Would that come in the same time?
Did she freeze on everyone? I only heard time and then it cut out. So
What
Yeah,
you got-
sorry.
she's
My
asking-
question was the timing. Would we still be within 20 days? Would we be constrained by that?
120 days.
and there is an option to ask for an extension,
Mhm.
but you don't have to do that now.
And I was looking through a list of, one of the other schools had a list of failed projects, and a good portion of them received extensions. So I don't think it's that uncommon. I don't know if Jim or Larry, you have any feedback on, sounded like it was, as long as you were working on it, they might be willing to give you a little bit of an extension.
It'd be interesting to get a list of failed projects over the last, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Maybe get away from COVID and understand what happened. Did they go back a second time, and what did they do to, if it passed, did it pass a second time or did it not? And if it did, what changed between version 1 and version 2?
Greg, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would just say that the focus of the call today with MSBA was on the 120 days we do have. We didn't have any conversation around what happens if we ask for an extension,
Yeah.
so forth. So they were pretty focused on you have 120 days. The project is approved by the board of directors. You have the grant, the $35 million, and what we decided in 120 days is the question at hand, and whether we need an extension is kind of not something we discussed with MSBA today.
And they were very clear that the people that were on the phone did not have the authority to grant it either. So that was also very clear.
And you were talking to pretty low level people, right? Our direct contacts, not the executive director nor anybody on the board, correct?
There was no one on the board that was on the phone. That's not typically, but I would say these very experienced professionals that I know the district has had interactions with over the last 5 years. Go ahead, Steve.
I heard you say any alterations to the plan submitted, Jason, so site of the site of the building, but I would imagine that would also include like a decrease in the scope of the work too. So if we were to reduce the ask of the town and reduce the reimbursement that we would get from MSBA, that would still put us at the beginning of the line. Is that correct?
Correct. Right. So size of the building, square footage of the building, number of students, or just simply the physical address, right? The question I posed to them was if you literally took all the work and you just put it somewhere else, right? Which I'm not aware of a spot for that to go, but just throwing that out there, they confirmed that even just a physical change of address because of the site would create that.
They proved that with Medfield because that's what Medfield wanted to do. So
Yeah.
Steve, did you say front of the line or back of the line? We're going to be in the back of the line.
No, I was saying, yeah, I was saying back of the line. Any change whatsoever puts us at the back.
We're back to where we were in 2021.
Yep.
Go ahead, Greg.
So just add that they also mentioned that if we submitted another statement of interest when the window opens, it would be without prejudice. So it would not be, we would not be put at the end or not considered as a result of this particular project. They did indicate, though, that we'll be competing against applicants and districts who submit applications at that time. So that is a factor. So if there are schools that submit a new statement of interest along with us, if that is the choice we make, then it is in the context of those submissions that we're competing against.
Greg, when is that window?
January of 26, I
Okay.
believe, Jason. Is
Yeah,
that
It's not within the 120 days. Okay.
No, they just finished a window within the last 30 days. So we'd be looking at if we decided to do something new and partner with the MSBA, you would be looking at an application this winter.
And then remind us, Greg, how long it takes to hear once when does the window close and when do they make their decision?
The board meets quarterly. It's usually a 3-month window that SOIs, the windows open. So I would imagine the earliest that SOIs would be considered would probably be June of 26.
A year from now.
Yep.
All right. So what I wanted to do is propose a few items that I think are critical to changing, I'll call it the course of where this goes. I'm not opining when I offer any of these thoughts that it's a good idea, but what I'm trying to do is cast a wide net of options for us to propose to all constituents that may weigh in to the next steps here of where we go. The first item that I think needs to be answered in my proposal on how to do this would be through community survey and outreach is whether the actual Neary parcel is a non-starter. and whether the community would ever stand behind any sort of project on that site, regardless of the size, base repair, two-grade school, four-grade school, new add renovation. And pretend like we have a clean slate and just understand if there is any support to do anything there, what additional steps the community would want beyond what's already been done to be comfortable with that site. Presuming there's two possible outcomes. Community is actually already comfortable with some additional work, or they're not comfortable. I'm going to go down sort of a decision tree here, and what I'd like to do is add branches to this tree that we can actually then put into like a slide or a presentation once we deliberate. If the community is comfortable with that site with some sort of additional work, I then think we need to make sure and go back to what all the options were on that existing building. Make sure the community is working with the right cost estimates and make sure that they understand what the impact is without the MSBA on all but a new four-grade school at that site. That could involve changes to the scope, though, in terms of what, for example, a base repair is or has to be, and what the best answer is for the community. The opposing view of that would be we find that the community is not comfortable with that site, or we're never going to get to two-thirds, which is really the measure I think we need to be looking at here, to support construction on that site, which then I think would pull into question a whole bunch of other options. Option one, I think we heard it loud and clear at various points in time during the process, is how do we use the existing Finn and Woodward schools, full well knowing that there would have to be some construction project at one or both of those schools to be able to accommodate the grades that would be consolidated from a Neary. I also think as part of that, while the school committee has obviously weighed in on this, a further programmatic study should be shown of what the limitations would be of having fifth grade at Trotter from a space perspective if you got over the philosophical educational benefits that have been outlined by our committee and the educators throughout this.
And Jason, I'd add to that transportation, kind of how would that work? Like, okay, would they be with high school kids? Would we need another bus? You know, who knows, right? But I think kind of just exploring that as well.
Yeah. And then I think the other option, while it wouldn't be MSBA funding, would be if this project had been proposed on the Finn site, would that have changed the outcome? I don't know the answer to that, but again, something for consideration based on the feedback that we've heard.
So this all sounds like a reasonable plan to try to gauge get more people involved than we had all along until the very end. But the problem with that is the biggest concern by far. Yeah, there were some concerns over site, but that still was, I think, the minor concern compared to the cost, right? It was cost, cost, cost. So in the survey, if you don't give people the cost of the options you're talking about, how do you expect them to weigh in on which they might prefer?
I think this takes a few phases. I purposely not mentioned cost thus far, but I agree that that was a huge factor. I think we need to understand what options the community wants to see the costing around and which ones they're really serious about versus throwing out other options. And what I would hope is, there were some opponents to the project that did engage with us at public meetings, but I would say it was on average less than 10 throughout the course of our meetings. I would ask that anyone that is supportive that something has to be done at Neary, that has ideas or solutions they want to be thrown out there for consideration, while this is fresh in everyone's mind, that we get those on a piece of paper and we do like a phase 1. And we just try to understand what the community wants to see costing around so that we can bring forward a different menu of options than we had previously. Because really, there's one MSBA option at this point, but the community can dictate now any other options they want to, with the understanding that we would be dictating the scope, the process, and the cost, but also footing 100% of the cost. I would say once we get that, you narrow it down, and then that's what you cost out and show. But I do firmly believe that there is a um, undertone in the vote that is well beyond the capacity of this committee to solve. And that's just the overall tax increase that was voted on at the annual town meeting and what is now projected. And I realize it's incredibly conservative without any sort of due diligence for next year. I think it behooves select board, advisory, and any other board that you think is relevant to start to sharpen the pencils on that um, at the same time and really show a realistic picture for the community as we move forward. Because, well, I realize every dollar certainly matters. I think what got lost in some of our messaging is uh, this project got thrown in to a much larger um, economic situation from a tax increase perspective. And I'm not asking anyone's opinion of where they were at or not at on that, but I thought that created significant headwinds to our goals and our missions of this project as we move forward, regardless of which option moves forward here.
I don't disagree with what you said at all, except that if you didn't attempt to show people what their total projected taxes were, that includes this project, I just think you would have, first of all, you've been asked and would have been pretty short-sighted.
No,
I
I
would
100% agree. You had to do that.
I don't really care. Most people don't care necessarily what the individual components are. They care what their total check is that they're going to write. So if we left that piece of it out, I think that we would have been misleading. So I don't think we had a choice. Now, for those on here, like Andrew Pfaff and you, and then understand how the budget process works, fiscal year 27 looks awful right now because we haven't been able to do what we do to it. We just basically did it with raw numbers. We made really conservative assumptions with revenue. For example, we brought down free cash by over $1 million, which is probably not correct. So we were trying to be as conservative as we possibly could to make sure that if anything, we gave people a number that was really going to be higher than what they were going to pay. So I think we do have to rethink that again too. But I know fiscal year 27 scared people. I had a couple people ask me about it, and I tried to explain, and I just kind of lost them with the explanation because we're in the weeds with this. We understand it, that piece of it. So I do think that that certainly played a part in this. But of course, the whole purpose of doing them was to show that this project itself was a relatively small part of the total taxes. The total taxes, yes, are large or significant. They're part of everybody's budget for sure, material part, but this project fit really nicely in because of our current debt situation, et cetera. So I hear you, Jason, but I don't think we could have just shown the cost of the project without showing the projected total taxes for the first few years to really show how this project fit in.
And I wasn't suggesting that. We had to do that. What I'm saying is, you used the word scared. that's what we heard the last 2 weeks. We heard that word over and over again, is people were scared by those numbers. But only one portion of that was the numbers that were within the control of this committee. So I think what I'm asking is, regardless of the path that the community goes down, there's still a capital ask related to the Southborough Public Schools. Whether it relates to Neary or something else, that obviously is going to be for the community to decide. But I think those that control the budget process need to think about not only policy statements, but also ring fencing in finding a way to um, control and educate the community about the decisions that are in the overall total budget in each of the components there so that they can make choices between all of the priorities that exist, which I realize there are significant competing priorities in this town and many others, plus obviously the whole residential versus commercial um, shift that continues to be hotly debated and contested in town.
Yeah, and I think Jason, the other side is the people voting at town meeting need to understand what they're looking at, right? I mean, the police and fire, the deputy chief, 3 officers in the collective bargaining agreement. That's over 50% of the cost of Neary. Just that one approval there. It's like 52% of the total cost. So it's, that didn't even get held at town meeting, right? So, that was no issue, but this has become an issue, right? So I think it's, if we want to hold the fire to the budget, then town meeting needs to hold the fire to the budget. You can't just selectively approve stuff, because that's what's happened, and that's why we're in this situation. So I think the town needs to understand that.
At this past town meeting, as Andrew says, I'm just reiterating this, there were no questions at all on the significant increase in the fire and police budgets. We had many meetings where we discussed why those were proposed. Afterwards, there was a comment on the blog that said, I don't know why Kathy Cook didn't get up and do a presentation on that. My reply was, we had the police chief and the fire chief sitting right there. I would think the town meeting would rather hear from them than me, and no one asked a question. We thought that there would be plenty of questions on why that was needed. The 3 new police officers and the deputy, and then the increases in the collective bargaining agreements that all took place. So I hear you, Jason, but it's hard to answer a question when it doesn't, you try to answer
No,
it, but if they don't ask it, what do you do?
yeah, I hear you. Okay, so I guess what I would like to hear from the committee so that we can identify how, what and how we're going to bring forward to the select board and school committee is, other than the ideas that I threw out, what other items do you feel like we need to get our arms around from a community input perspective to chart the next steps? Denise?
I just think this is put it back a little bit, but I do think it's important that these ideas that we put them out there, I think it's important that the town understands, without the SBA money, the MSBA money, and with the MSBA money, what the differences are and what the indebtedness of the taxpayer will be reimbursement. I think we have to compare all of those so they have an informed decision. So we need to know what the tax implication will be to reimbursement on the projects.
Jason's saying that, Denise, but he's saying we will get there, but initially we've got to, and I think phase 1 is a good way to look at this. Phase 1 is a general response as to what people are interested in us pursuing, so that we hopefully get people involved from the very get-go this time, and stay involved until we get to an answer. Clearly, something's got to be done to Neary School. I think that message is out there. And now the question is, what?
Andrew?
Yeah, so Jason, and I do like the idea of kind of setting up the guardrails and table stakes, right? So, I would phrase it as there's really some key decision points that need to be made, right? The site of the school. I think it's at the Neary site. We could talk about Finn. And then I think there should be a third option of there is no town land available. Maybe we need to acquire it from public or private hands somewhere, not identified yet, but there would be a significant cost to that, right? We don't own it, so we would have to acquire it. Is that, kind of that is a decision one, right? Okay, so site, then there's, do we want a 4 grade or 2 grade? Like, do we want to consolidate? Yes or no, basically. And there's a significant operational savings to that or not, right? So just kind of like, I think it's just kind of like columns that we could kind of vote up and down, toggle, and that'll help us to kind of break down all the options, into the different components. And then it's, okay, would you rather, when we get through that of, okay, this is the site we would want to have it, or this is the configuration, then it's okay, add reno, we can get into the different details of what you would do to whatever site we would pick. Obviously, you pick a third site, you would have to be new because there's nothing there. But yeah, I think it just kind of, getting some of those kind of guardrails established, on where we go from the next steps pieces. But I like that idea.
Mark?
I'm gonna go down a different path. And we're, by doing a survey, I get it. But we're in an environment where no information is the right information. Where we can state facts, such as I'll state a fact right now, that most of Neary land is covered by Chapter 97. And the opportunity to expand down there is near.
Finn,
You need
Finn,
Finn.
Mark, Finn.
Finn, I'm sorry, Finn. I'm sorry. I'm very concerned that we'll do a survey in this very divisive climate. We're not going to get a result that makes any sense. We have a very short window. We have 5 iterations that we've looked at. We've had 5 iterations that people have complained they've have no choice. I think we have a hard door that MSBA is telling us, and underlying this is we have a school that has a year or two of life, if that. And I was going to discuss the fact that we have missed a window. And I'm very concerned that we are relying on a school now for possibly not just next year, but even if we're quick, I think we're into the following year as well. So I think the time for a survey may be after we're told no the second time. Or we get something that maybe we have to work with MSBA. But I think we have a very short window to figure out what we're going to do. And if we can find out whether somebody really wants Neary site or not. But we say we have a door that's closing very fast. And I think we have to put the best on the table that we can. And that'll tell us exactly what we can do.
I appreciate those thoughts, but I think if we had missed by one vote, I may fully 100% agree with you. And I realize that it's a short window, but I do think you have to find a way to build confidence. We've studied this for thousands of hours. Most people that walked in the room, there's a few that have studied it for hundreds. Most had studied it for 30 minutes, and some had studied it for about 2 minutes. And their first impression was our presentations, right? Both ours and then the one that followed. So I do think it will help if you believe we still have the right plan, it will help to build consensus by understanding what else people want to see and showing them the details behind that so that educated individuals, which this community is very educated, can potentially say, I didn't see it that way the last time, but I do now. Or no, I still vehemently am opposed to this because of some factual item that we're going to have to agree or disagree on. I'm not sure, as someone that has stood at most of these open forums and talked to many people, I'm not sure that we have a precise pulse because it wasn't just one item, right? It was, basically four items and how those intersect that created the groundswell of opposition. So I just think we shouldn't be scared by the 120 days. We should um, make sure people are aware of that and make sure that the uh, extension is certainly not a guarantee. But I would have to assume that we would have to see a change in temperature from those that oppose the project to rightfully bring forward anything that looks remotely close to what has already been brought forward.
Unless you do what we talked about earlier, you bring forward that project, but with others
Right.
that are
That's
actually costed out, truly costed out, so people really can compare apples to apples. We had cost numbers, but as we know, because of the process, we did not scrub the original proposals like we did the final proposal. So if you had that scrubbing done on whatever we think the right 4 or 5 choices could be, and truly were able to line those up and people could see what those costs were. And they really did have a choice at another special town meeting between those plus the MSBA funded ones. So you really had net cost for all of them. It might be received differently. We've had projects in the past that took a second, time to get them through. The Main Street project, the regional dispatch we worked on, that took 2 years to do. We had to do that twice. So sometimes it does take 2 times to really fine tune your message better now that we really know. Part of this is at least I was a little blindsided at the end with the vehement opposition. And it came pretty late in the process. And I'm not sure we reacted perfectly as far as what we could do. So we've learned. So I just hate, I'm kind of with Mark on this part. I really hate to totally give up on $35 million. There's a third of this project would be paid for by the state. It'd be a project that lasted 50-something years and, as we've said, would put all the school capital projects to bed, except for the next 25 years, other than normal maintenance, roofs, etc. So I hate to give up on it completely, but I don't think that coming back a second time with the exact project in 120 days is going to change a lot of minds. You'd have to change so much as far as people, unless you got a lot more voters, which I'm surprised at what the turnout was on both. It was pretty low on both compared to what could have been there. So maybe the answer really is to bring back the multiple choices, including this one, and let people truly have a chance to look at equal projects with fully costed out numbers. We'd have to figure out how we're going to get the money to do that. And then you present 5 options and then they decide. And I don't know if it's 5, I'm just making up a number. It could be 4, it could be 6.
we're on the same page there. I don't think you just walk away from 3 years worth of work, um, but you also need to listen and provide potential choice, but facts that back them up, and hope that those facts are compelling enough to lead to some sort of result. Andrew, I'll go to you, then back to Mark.
Yeah, and I think if we are going to solicit feedback, I think we need to figure out a way to hear from the 6,000 people that did not participate. right? That, I mean, yes, we had, a great turnout at both town meeting and the ballot, but again, it was still, what, 2,000 out of the 7,800 registered voters, right? There's a lot of people in town that this would impact or might have an opinion on it that I don't know where they've been, but they must not have known about it, or, must not have had enough information or whatever it was. But figuring out some way to get those other people engaged so that we have a real consensus of the town. I mean, maybe we're not going to get all 8,000, but I'd like to get 51% of the people engaged, even if they don't show up at town meeting, but to know what their thoughts are, right? I mean, so to get a real majority of the registered voters actually opining on this project and not just a minority of it.
At our normal national elections, we get what, 6,000? So if we can do that, we should be able to get people with the right outreach to weigh in on this.
Mark?
Let me just start out. Kathy and I have not had any discussion. I'm going to give you just an out-of-the-box scenario that might work, that we do develop firm costing numbers. We go through 5, maybe 6 different iterations. Renovating Neary for 2-grade school. We develop a 2-grade new Neary. And there's a reason we have to do that. And remind me at the end, I'll tell you why. We have an ad-ren 4-grade school. We have it in our plans. And we have a 4-grade new school where we have all the information developed. I'm going to add a plan B to that list. We go through all the pricing. We analyze the educational, how it fits in, what we need to make it fit in. And we do that analysis so that we have 5 developed proposals. We might add a 6, but it would answer your question, Jason, if we say, let's do this on another site. So we could add that and get people to focus in on that. And then I'm going to ask for 2 public forums. One before Labor Day and one after Labor Day. But they actually will be town meetings. Registered voters will be able to vote. There'll be one article on each of those forums. In other words, I'm forcing people to come. People aren't listening to us, so let's force the issue. On the agenda are the 5 or 6 proposals. We make a presentation and we go through all the questions and answers. It should be televised. There should be ability of other people to ask questions. It's an information session. It can be run by the moderator, but then we will take a vote. And we're going to take a ranked order vote. It would be a secret ballot. And everyone who's a registered voter would be able to rank their choices. 1 for the one they want, down to 5 or 6, if it's 6, that they don't want. Those votes would be put in the envelope and Jim Haggerty would put them in his safe. They're not going to be opened. We go to the second town forum. There's a reason for this. We're going to have to do work in the summer. So I'm giving people the chance to go there, or they can go when they're back from school. And this is to try to get it into the 120 days. We have an identical town meeting, except the only people who can vote at the town meeting are voters that didn't attend the first. And we go through the same process. We go through all the new information and we get our ranked values. At that point in time, Jim Haggerty opens them up and we eliminate the 2 choices that are the worst 2 choices. And we rank the remaining 3 that were the best vote goers. And that's what we walk into a town meeting. So we have 3 ranked proposals with all the information that we've shared and talked about in two very easy town meeting processes. And then we have two shots to get a 2/3 majority. If we discuss the best proposal first and it gets a 2/3 majority, the other ones are immediately discarded. Or we may go to all three and not get it. Force a reconsideration of all three and try again. We have a lot to lose if we don't get a solution on the table. And each of these will have a separate column of what it means with MSBA. We may know that if the majority of people just want us to renovate Neary School, MSBA is, we may not be able to wait that long, but those are the decisions that'll all be on the table. I think we will get an educated solution. It gives us an immediate direction. And frankly, if we have to go back to MSBA and we've already taken a town vote and we've done 90% of the work already, I hazard a guess that I don't think the MSBA has ever been in a position with a project that's so well along that we shouldn't be successful through that process the next time around. I just think we've done a ton of work. For whatever reasons, we didn't come to a consensus. Well, we have a second shot. And I think the biggest thing I heard was that you've taken the choices away from us. We made the legitimate decisions, but let's put them out on the table. I think we have the best shot of doing something if we do that. We'll know if we decide to add a 6 on another site. We know, and that gets a lot of votes. We know that people are uncomfortable with the Neary site. But I think we've got one shot, and we need to take a lot off the table to focus on what could work. Our hurdle is that much harder, and I really think if we present it and we have all the facts on the table and people have a chance to choose. And yeah, we could throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I'd rather know what people want and then we have to move it forward. That seems to me maybe the most logical approach. We can't force people to listen to us. I have never, ever been through a process where so few people attended things. And to me, that's discouraging. But I think as a town, we could get together, listen, here are the facts, here are the 5 proposals. And if you have another one, then vote them all down. My other thing I would suggest is that the ballots would have to be filled out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're not going to have a big enough number to, if somebody just votes for one and then walks away. Up front, it needs to be clear. We want these ranked. We want you to tell us how you feel. And then all those registered votes, if they are ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if they aren't, that vote gets thrown out. But we will get a clear view of what the 3 high proposals are. And we can focus it in on just those. That's just my thinking. I think we could do it, but it has to be just done separately.
Thanks, Mark. Roger?
Just a couple of questions, and then a comment. So I know we've talked about the election. We had a couple thousand voters there. But do we know the number of people at town meeting? Was it about 1,100 total, or was that?
1171.
Okay, so that number was certainly a lot smaller than people that came out to the election. Almost just a little more than half, I guess. And Mark, you used the phrase Plan B, or at the beginning of, what you just said. That were you talking about? Were you using that phrase to sort of describe the infamous sort of Plan B? Or were you talking about just Plan B of whatever you were talking about? You know what I'm trying to ask?
Oh, no, I'm talking about the plan that,
Okay,
that was hanging out there. It
all right,
has never been priced.
the plan
We
that
have
was,
never tested it. Now's our chance to go through what we've done with every other proposal.
so then by that, so my understanding of this alternate plan, is that some number of people, and the problem again is the vocal minority issue or not, because you just don't know. Um, don't want, don't think we need a fourth school. Think that basically we can, I don't know, I want to use basically push the students off into different, the Finn, Woodward, and Trotter. So is that one of the options you were talking about presenting people of
Yeah,
the,
I mean, Roger, I don't think we need to go into that specificity tonight, though.
okay,
But I think is
that's a whole
part of,
different, that's a whole different situation. That wasn't one of the 12 options, right, that we looked at. So I just wondered if this is one of the options we're going to try to present.
I mean, I think when I made my initial proposal, I acknowledged the fact that um, there's a philosophical discussion that continues on grade
Okay.
5 at Trotter, which people are either going to accept or reject based on the arguments from the district. But then there's a purely capital component that falls clearly within this committee's purview to show what it would mean at that school if that was what the community wanted to do and the school committee changed their mind in terms of the educational policy behind that.
Okay.
And that would include obviously some level of capital, but it also includes a significant amount of programming. I don't know the answer to that tonight. I'm not expecting Greg to outline that, but I think that needs to be crystal clear again for the community to see it and make a decision. I'm I've spent a lot of time thinking about the difference between this vote and the public safety vote. I've in my mind equated it to the following. In this vote, the Neary Building Committee was literally on an island. And there was very little collaboration with any other board or committee, despite support, but collaboration across the board. The Public Safety Building Committee was at the center, what I would say, a groundswell of collaboration, consensus, and candidly compromise. That's where we need to get, right? There was 20 plus different groups, whether they be official boards or committees or not, that got that project to fruition. That's where this committee needs to get to. And that's just, and I think part of it is answering questions that you may or may not agree with, but again, putting it out there. And I think that's my biggest request to anyone that opposed this project is I certainly welcome any sort of thought of how you get to consensus, not just firing, uh, random thoughts out there. Let's throw thoughts out there and then study them with the experts that should answer them. Some of them should be answered by educators only. Some of them should be answered by consultants. Some of them should be answered by community preference.
So Jason, I'm not disagreeing with the fact that the Public Safety Study Committee had more help with the committee's advisory, was certainly very involved in it, et cetera. But that was a $25 million project. This was a lot more expensive. If we were proposing $25 million, I think this would have passed pretty easily. And on top of that, we had a police station that truly was shameful. I'm not saying Neary's not heading that way, but that police department had to be replaced, as far as that goes. So there's still some distinguishing factors from that project to this one. But I'm just gonna reiterate this. I think we've got to, if we're gonna truly, try to get this project done sooner than later, and we know it needs to be done sooner than later, we have got to propose alternatives that are fully costed out, just like this one was, somehow, some way. Knowing that the MSBA funding won't apply to those, we've got a net number we've got to show for these projects, so people really have the ability to distinguish, whether they're willing to pay a little bit more and get a lot more, whatever. But right now, the general numbers we used just didn't seem to satisfy the need to understand more about the cost of other alternatives, not just what was called Plan B. There's others, right? So we've got to figure out what those alternatives are, the realistic alternatives are, and give people the ability to look at the cost of those compared to what we have on the table with the current project. Quickly.
So, is there any other comments for the committee before I go? What I plan to do is we have 3 public hands raised, so I'm going to go to those, allow each of them to speak, and then outline what I believe our next steps are for us to decide and then schedule accordingly. Does that work for everyone? All right, so I'm going to go to Gina's iPhone first.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for all you've done during this whole process. I
Gina, can you just
was,
introduce yourself quickly, name and
oh,
address?
hi. I'm so sorry. My name is Gina Glazomitsky. I live at 90th and Stone Lane. I'm a parent. I have 3 kids currently in the Southborough school system. I was obviously at the vote, the town meeting, and then also the ballot vote for the Prop 2.5 override. Something I heard repeatedly was that people genuinely, opponents of New Neary genuinely believe that there is a zero cost, no construction, strictly reshuffling of kids throughout the schools that are already existing within the town. And I think that if consensus and compromise and all of these wonderful things that you guys have been talking about this whole meeting is to be reached, the messaging has to include that something must and will be done. I don't think that people fully grasped that concept, that doing nothing at Neary is not an option, and that any reshuffling of kids will in fact include a construction project. I don't think that that messaging was fully out there, and people who voted no do truly believe that there is a zero cost solution to this problem.
Thank you for that. Go to Eric Glazer next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Ken.
All right. So first, I applaud, and Jason, I think since you're leading this, I applaud your review to take, I think, some humility from the vote and recognizing that, and to be clear, I voted no for a variety of reasons, which I just want to give you some very direct, clear feedback, which I think will help you with your decision process. But first off, thank you for sort of taking some humility from the vote. And I would just caution about saying that all people who voted no don't recognize that there's not cost with any other option. But in reality, the quote unquote plan B was really consideration on just trying to use our existing resources as efficiently as possible. Like I got 4 kids, all have gone through Neary. And if our school age population were going to double, I would have written a check tomorrow, right? But you have these dynamics at play where our school age population is flat, but you're asking the community for a substantial investment, which, like, I think everybody that I talked to was certainly willing to consider other alternatives. And I think you hit it right on the head to the extent that you can come forth with other options. And look, I don't think they have to be fully baked in terms of the cost, but you're smart people and you've spent your thousands of hours looking at this. You pretty much know how to rack and stack from the low end to the high end in terms of the cost. I would propose to you that you should follow what the planning board did with the MBTA mapping exercises, where they reached out and had sessions in person. Don't do it by a survey. Do it and engage the community. And Mark, I don't know if 2 meetings is enough, but I liked your idea of getting people in a room, maybe after having done some pre-communication, and for anybody who's worked in a corporate environment and you're going to your CEO, you've already politicked your project with everybody who's going to be in that room, and you know the answer before you walk in the door. So I think that's a great idea, and I think you'll get a lot of people engaged in that, and even a lot of folks that I talk to on the no side will appreciate that, and then they can make as an informed decision as possible. But I don't know who said it. I don't know if it was you, Roger, that said that coming with just with an, or whoever said it, coming back with just the second, taking another bite at the apple with just the one option, you're going to get lambasted even more, right? It was already a tough fight, and people were getting, it was amazingly how nasty it got. And I was very disappointed by that across from both sides of it. But I think you're thinking about it the right way. And I think you'll get a lot of engagement from folks who are super skeptical. And maybe it's not a 4-grade option, it's another option, but at least it's informed. So thank you. And with that,
Eric, stay there for a second. It's Kathy Cook. So I went to a lot of the MBTA mapping sessions, and they were pretty well attended. I mean, still a very small group, but they were relatively well attended for a lot of things. So I understand how that worked, but I don't. I guess I'm having trouble understanding how you envision this working with different permutations of the school projects. For example, when we were in the phase of, call it, envisioning what this new school might look like, we did gather a lot of people. There were parents involved, teachers involved. They went to look at other schools, etc. So that was a pretty big group. They were in, they sat down and looked at what they want, and we had someone guiding us as far as what we want. So to me, that was a lot like the MBTA. So how would you see this working as far as what would you ask the people there to do?
well, I frame it this way is one, I think the outreach over the past 3 months, had it been done 2 years ago, and I generally have followed the blog since the process with Ferris and the 40B in our backyard. So while yes, I was guilty of not paying attention to town politics probably up until about 3 years ago, the outreach over the past 3 months, had it been done at that level 2 years ago when you were going through these permutations of your 12 options, I think would have helped. I think it's really just giving folks a view of, yes, renovation is absolutely an option. And I think, Mark, to say that the school is going to fall into the ground next year, I think is a scare tactic. I mean, I'm an engineer, but I'm not a structural engineer. I don't have any concerns about sending my first grader there in 2 years if I had to. If there's a legitimate safety issue, then you got to get those kids out of there. And that's a whole other separate point. But I think, Kathy, you've got probably 2 or 3 options: renovation, a 2-grade, a 4-grade, maybe another permutation here or there. You've probably done enough work to put some rough numbers to those. And I think somebody mentioned during the town hall meeting to spend even some time maybe on the renovation option and what that could look like versus the 40 million. And can it be piecemealed? Because those are the themes that kept popping up. Why can't we just slap a roof on it? I'm not saying that's the right option, but I think you just put together a thoughtful presentation with as much information as you have over the course of the summer. Have whatever 5, 4, 5, 6. It may be tough to get people to attend, but at least you've tried. And the people who pay attention will attend those, right? The 2,000 people who voted, most of them may or may not have paid attention to a lot of these. I don't know, but folks like myself and the others who really thought about this, and I'm not saying 5th grade going to Neary is the best option, and I never believed it was going to be cost free, but you're leveraging your existing capital resources to their most. Any company is going to do that. Why wouldn't a town? So I know I've spent a lot of time talking, and I appreciate you listening. So thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I would just say anything you can do whenever we decide to host these forums, short term and long term, to help us spread the word.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to do it.
I
And I
think
think you get a lot of positive feedback.
yeah, and because I think that it's certainly been my biggest disappointment with this project is I appreciate what you mentioned about the last 3 months, but the committee has had these forums, and we'd use the Trotter Auditorium and have 5 people in it as a order of magnitude when we were starting this. But we hope if anything comes out of this vote is that it's hopefully woken the community up to a good discussion, in one that we hope will take place, like you said, in person, not on social media, but just some real constructive feedback, I think can go a long way.
Yeah, Jason, I think you're spot on. And again, apologies, and I'll be as guilty as anybody. I didn't attend any of them. I didn't see any notifications on the blog, et cetera. That's shame on me, but clearly you've got people's attention, and I think you'll get a lot more engagement. So I think that would be hugely valuable.
All right.
I think
Thank you
so
for your
too.
comments.
I think we do have more engagement. And one of the things that happened early on, and Jason, remember this one at one of these forums, and this was one where again, this was an early on forum. And one person said, I'm not going to ask any questions tonight. I'm just going to wait to town meeting. And we said, no, you got to ask questions now because by town meeting, we've only got one alternative. So we clearly didn't get that message out that we were going to end up at the end of the day with one project to vote on and not 4 or 5. So we understand that now. And hopefully by the end of tonight, we will take everything that anybody says into account and come up with a process that will end up with the ability to get a project through that will solve the Neary problem.
Yeah, and like my last point is I think Mark was spot on, is to walk into the room knowing the answer from the community. And Kathy, the only point it is just because the money's available doesn't necessarily mean, and I'm not trying to fault you, right? Because you're trying to do the best you can. Just because the money's there doesn't necessarily mean you should go after it, because at the cost of 70 million, and that was a theme that a lot of people were commenting on. But look, let's see how the options play out, and there's work to be done. So thank you.
All right. Katie, Barry.
I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. So I'm Katie Berry. I live at 23 Richards Road. I totally respect all of you and the work that you've put in. I mean, some of you I'm friends with, some of you I work with and completely respect. I do want to address a few things that I think a true message was sent through the voters, and I hope it was received. And after watching this meeting, I'm not too sure. But I do love the idea of collaboration and moving forward. There is nobody on either side that thinks nothing should happen to Neary. But I don't think the research has to be done in other towns. Come talk to me. Come talk to the people who are very much against this, and let's work together and fix Neary. I also find that these grand thoughts of people saying that the no voters think that, you know, there's a no cost option only hurts your cause. We're very educated. Your message was received and it didn't resonate. The polls and the town meeting spoke, and I hope you can hear that. But we all want to work together and do what's right for Neary and for our kids and for the rest of the taxpayers. I do also find it super concerning that it was suggested tonight that a town meeting be held with the people who didn't vote only. Not only do I think that's absolutely concerning, I think that might be illegal. But I just wish that we could work together with mutual respect and without these overarching assumptions of the other on both sides, because you guys have done a ton of work and I appreciate that. And we all want to do what's best for the town of Southborough.
And Katie, Mark didn't mean that. He's talking about doing forums first, and you only get a vote on one of those, then doing the special town meeting with results from those. So he wasn't talking about having an exclusive special town meeting, although it did sound that way for a minute. I agree. So what do you mean by other towns? Clarify that as far as going to other towns, not talking about what anybody else has done?
So you actually, it was you, Kathy, who said, like, let's go look and see what happened to other towns when the no vote came through. That might be valuable, but I think your most valuable is to sit down and talk with the no voters and find out what's important to them and how to frame it. I think a lot of what was said didn't resonate, and it was probably very unintentional, but it hit the heart of a lot of taxpayers. And I would love to work with you to get around that, because we need to do something for Neary, but not everyone can afford $600 and say that that's marginal. So Jessica Levinson, who said that at town meeting, it really resonated, in my opinion.
Thanks, Katie, for your comments. We'll go to Johanna.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay. Hi, Johanna Shaner, 14th Air Lane. I again just want to say thank you for all the work that the committee has done. And I agree a lot with what Eric and Katie just said in public comment as well. I think we have to take what came through in the vote, and in the next iteration of what gets put out into the community, figure out a way to build confidence and trust in the community with the messaging that gets put out there. I think, I truly believe that we came out with a no vote due to, I, I think you may have the right answer, but I think a lot of it has to do with the way that it was communicated, or a lack of being able to find the information and all of the work and all of the analysis that you guys had done. I also think that it's a great idea to put out the options out there. And yes, you do have to address the no Neary option. Put numbers behind that, and put out a pros and cons list of why that either will or will not work, given the educational vision that we have for our town. One of the things I would like to maybe put out there is having some community ambassadors. So working with people that may have been either for New Neary or against New Neary, bring them more into the fold, and then have some community ambassadors out there to kind of like spread your message. And then the last thing I would like to just suggest is meeting people where they're at with the messaging. Some people are on Facebook only. Some people are going to go to your website. Some people are going to go to My Southborough. Some people are going to talk to their friends. Some people want to hear it through maybe the school newsletter. Some people want to go to community forums, but really like figuring out a consistent, cohesive message and putting it out in different ways, different mechanisms to meet people where they're at, so that the information, a consistent message, reaches them where they're at. So again, thank you. And I look forward to attending future meetings and giving feedback as I can. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't think I would say I think the committee welcomes any communication assistance that is out there in the community, including sign up and join us as we move forward, because I think that will go a long way. I will also say one of the limitations of our committee is that we are bound by rules by the State Office of Campaign Finance. They're just simply items that we cannot, you know, our job is to provide facts. So I would say that that impacted us throughout this process, but I am proud of the way that our committee operated to make sure that we followed the rules and laws that were out there, despite it impacting our ability to communicate in a more forthright manner.
So Jason, can you have people like, myself and Eric and Katie, who may join these meetings informally as residents of the town, then go out and kind of like spread the word, spread the message, whether it's through social media or other, about what is actually said on this, what's said on this meeting, for those people who don't necessarily want to take the time to, go and have to watch a hour and a half long replay of this meeting?
Yeah, I think that part of creating synopsis from our meetings will be, I think, important going forward. So I think certainly something we can discuss as we move forward, depending upon where the elected boards want us to go.
Okay. And then the last thing I just want to say is, sorry, it just came back to me. So one of the things that I actually put out there is, I really think that when you guys come up with whatever the options are going to be that you're either going to bring to forums or like your next meeting, you need to have like a comprehensive rubric of like, what are all of the areas, what are all of the requirements that you are bumping up against each one of the options that you're bringing against the community, so that people can see all of the options side by side. One of the things when I was going in and I was like looking to, so I was one of the individuals on the boards going, well, what's the difference between the base renovation $40 million option that was out there and a number was put to it, and the $6 million deferred maintenance, like just giving people the information about like what's included in your numbers as well. Like if you see an inflated number like 40 million, I couldn't find anywhere. What did that include? I didn't know what that included. Or versus the $6 million deferred maintenance, there was a list of that, and that was on a spreadsheet that was presented to the select board. So you can see what was in that number, but just giving people the more detailed information so that they could go in and actually assess what are these numbers outside of the new Neary. What are these numbers actually encompassing? Like what makes them up? That was one of the pieces of information I was looking for going into the
All right.
vote. And I know a lot of people in my circle were as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go to Marcy next.
Good evening, board members. Can you hear me?
You can.
Marcy Jones, 18 Lettisquama, member of advisory, but speaking as a private citizen. I think you guys are aware I was one of the no voters, and probably a lot of the rationale was, probably read by you in the advisory letter. But as a private citizen, I wanted to make a comment that could be helpful. If you take the tact of looking at this committee in the construct of high reliability organizations and processes, one of the things that really struck me, because it's part of the work that I do in my day job, is that the committee, in a sense, I think hindsight's 2020 is somewhat flawed in getting the result that you want. For example, it's all with great intentions, of course, that I think select board or whoever appointed the members from the certain committees, and certainly as an advisory member we put forward Andrew and appreciate all the work that he's done. But I think as voters look at the information, what we see is that the chair of capital planning, the chair of select board, and the chair of advisory, with a huge vested interest in this project, which we understand, right? But there's really no committee that was independent of the process that held a huge sort of fiscal financial responsibility towards vetting the process so that the voter would know this was independent, right? The NBC came to the committees and presented the information, and let's say select board or advisory or capital planning had sort of that independent vote. To me, that really could have made a difference. And I don't know if others agree or disagree, but it's just something to think about maybe as you move forward, having some level of independence. And I think Jason, or you might have mentioned, having the other committees, invested earlier on could have also, maybe been, quite helpful. Again, all hindsight's 2020, but I think having the voters with some confidence of where to look that doesn't contain actually members of the NBC, but still expertise related to the financial piece could help. Thank you.
Marcel, I think it's a great comment, and I understand why that perception may be there. We didn't have a choice. We were required as part of the MSBA process to have representatives from all three of those committees. And I would welcome Andrew's thoughts on this particular comment, but advisory still had its option and exercised it through obviously the various votes as part of this committee to provide an independent view on the project, because my understanding is I don't think Andrew was allowed
He didn't.
to take a vote on that. So I think
It's more of a
that's
comment on perception, Jason, right?
no, I
Like,
get
and I
it.
think
So
the chairs is particularly, high level. And again, you could take my feedback. It may not be worth much, but I just feel like that, to me, if I was a voter and wasn't in the government, committees here, I would be thinking like, who really vetted this? Because when you work on something for 3 years, you have a vested interest in it passing. And I understand that. But who looked at it and said, could really endorse it for the town voter that wasn't in those seats? Thank you.
All right. I have iPhone. I'm just gonna need you to identify who you are, iPhone.
Hi, Kelly Conklin, 17 Sadie Hut Lane. I just first wanted to say thank you so much for all of you for your time. I found your work to be very transparent throughout this entire process. Your website was extremely accessible. Your Facebook page had all of the information. You guys were doing office hours. I mean, I feel like it's a bit insulting for people to suggest otherwise. Regardless of what time you showed up and started caring, I think you guys have done nothing but put forth your best effort, and I really appreciate that. In terms of voting, I think it's our responsibility to stay engaged, stay informed, and share factual information with our peers, both in real life and online. And I don't remember who brought it up, but this idea of community ambassadors is basically just saying we need to have people on your committee to stay informed. And I think that's just our responsibility as members of the town. Um, Regardless of what happens with zoning, I think the bottom line is that the driving vote and then the no vote, both at the meeting and on the ballot, is that people are worried about their bottom line and how it's going to affect them individually. And I think it needs to be made abundantly clear that no matter what, our taxes are going to be going up because something needs to be done. I love the idea of having the table with the cost analysis as well as the ranked choice voting. But again, I think to say that this process has been nothing but welcoming and transparent is just an insult to your time. So I just appreciate you all so much.
Thank you. I saw Becca's hand up, but it went down, so I'm gonna go to Joanne.
Okay, I should be unmuted now. Yes.
You're good.
Okay, Jason, I apologize. I kept raising my hand and lowering my hand and raising my hand and lowering my hand.
Just keep me on my toes.
I just do want to make a comment about the actual design, and I was a no vote, and I was part of the No New Neary group, and part of the No New Neary group. Larry from Arrow Street, I used to work at Sasaki Associates. I was a landscape architect. That was years ago, and I certainly did a lot of renderings. I know how beautiful everything can look, and I did look at the plan itself. And one of my comments, or my comment, is it seems like, and I understand why you all wanted it, like the best, the most beautiful. I know you dropped the auditorium and that saved, X million dollars, but I wanted to see a plan that maybe showed not going for the gold with everything. I wondered about having the widened corridors and the nest spaces. And I thought, well, are you going to have 5 kids from a class of 18 out there? And there isn't going to be a teacher out there to monitor them. And Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I saw windows on the corridor sides of the classroom. And I thought, are you kidding me? A child or a parent walking through, you're not going to peer into the classrooms. And if all those desks are in their little wedge formation, some kids are facing the back of the room, that's another distraction. And maybe it lets a lot more light in the hallways. But I also looked at that. How much cost does that add to the project? What about sound protection? Sound carries more through glass than walls. So are you adding costs and adding costs? And is that how you get to a design, part of what drives up the prices? Like, why didn't you come up with a design where the design itself, maybe the concepts were there, but you looked at a way to tone it down? Because a lot of people in town, a lot of people that I talk to a lot of people in town, we have budgets, we have to consider all the costs. We also have to consider that if you go down, consolidate with your plan to 3 schools, okay, but Finn came out, but Finn is still a school, still a town building, and we still have to cover the cost of that building as a town building. So it's not under the educational department. So, I would have liked to have seen something where it's not the be all end all school project, and it was the be all end all school project. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just remind you, Joanne, that we were in the schematic design phase, so all of that was still, had we been successful with the vote, would have been subject to further discussion and value engineering in the construction document phase.
Right, and believe me, I did enough construction documents, so
Yeah.
I understand that, except you're asking us to vote 108.5 million based on schematics. And that's also, for me personally, that's a tough call.
Understood. Appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
All right. I'm seeing, I've, oh, maybe not. All right. Hand went down. So Kathy, I'm looking to you from a select board perspective. Do you think, based on what you've heard tonight, that we should take a consolidated summary of this to the select board?
I do as of this moment. I think we've got a general idea of maybe where this should go, so I do. We can talk about, there's a couple things thrown out tonight, Mark's ideas, your idea. I've got this on the agenda for Tuesday. I don't think we should waste any more time if we think we're ready to do that, so I would say yes.
Yeah, I think it's important to start to, um, again, build the consensus and make sure we're all marching on the same path, in hopefully the same path and not divergent paths. But I realize we're gonna have to take some divergent paths to get back on the main path. Okay, so I think we'll plan on discussion with select board on Tuesday night. And do we want to start to draft a survey and nominate 2 members to go off and work on that? Or do we want to solely use open meetings to gather the feedback on the next steps that folks want us to look into, realizing that we usually get 25 or less people at a live meeting? Thoughts?
The other question is whether or not we wanted to break it up into subjects and give 2 people, like site versus configuration versus, I don't know, whatever other questions we had, to kind of flesh out what options would be in the survey. If that makes any sense.
I'm very much in favor of a very simple survey to start, simply related to the site. It being like 3 to 4 questions about, regardless of the scope of a project, would anyone ever vote to spend money at that site? I think that's just a question we need to get a pulse on.
And if that's all the survey is, then we just did it.
Jason, I emphatically agree that a survey is the best way to get feedback. The attendance at these meetings has been abysmal. I know you mentioned a couple of times the number 25, but really, whenever we got 25, which was rare, that was huge, right? I mean, we found ourselves saying, wow, we had a lot of people come to the meeting, 25, okay, instead of 5 or 8 or 6 or whatever. So, and frankly, most of those, honestly, and I can't even recall how many of these I went to answer questions. There were very few, most of the questions were, well, let me just leave it at that. You're not gonna get significant feedback at these meetings if you're looking for numbers. So I think a survey is the absolute best way to try to get as many people, to provide input as possible.
My other feeling is, if the answer is that that site is not acceptable for a school, then I want the statement made that it's unacceptable for anything. Right now, it's okay for my 3-year-old to roll around the grass at lacrosse on Sunday, but it's not okay for a school. If that site is not okay for a school, then we should fence it off. It's a hazardous site. It can't be used for anything else. Fields are closed. Everything is closed, right? I think, if that's how the town wants to feel, I don't want to see it repurposed for something else. I don't know, Mark, you're closer to it than me, but I don't have any concern with it. But if the town is that concerned that we will not move forward with the school on that site, then the site is toxic. Board it up, fence it off.
Mark?
Yeah, and I'll, look, if the majority wants to put a survey out, so be it. I have a concern that in this environment, we're going to get a different result. And I would hate to be guided. I would rather sit and listen to the 57 comments or the 30 comments and keep the conversation going. But I'm, if you want to do it, fine. I'm just going to step away from it. I just don't think it's going to serve any purpose, not in this environment.
Matt Probst can help us design this, Jason, in a way that he can also help us determine whether the results are statistically significant. They really do represent, a answer that we can use. So I hear you, Mark, but I think that it's worth a shot. Unfortunately, surveys don't always get answered very well in this town either, but we can try.
Craig?
I'll state probably the obvious, but whatever the next move of the Neary Building Committee, it has to demonstrate that we're listening. That has to demonstrate that whether it's a survey or a public forum, whatever it is, that the vote was clear. There was clarity around. We didn't get 2/3 and we didn't get a majority. And it wasn't by a little, it was by a lot. So whether it's a survey or a forum, the message has to be, we're listening and we want to understand more about the no or what people can support. I think my fear is that, if we move this project forward again, that whatever project we move forward can't divide a community. That this community is going to be here for many years, and whatever decision has to be a decision in a building that the community can support and not divide the community, and the community that spends the next 15 years trying to undo any damage that's done. So I just think we have to demonstrate that we are listening, whatever our next steps are. And I'm probably stating the obvious, but I think we did receive a message. It was clear. I do appreciate the clarity. So those are just my general comments.
Right. So my suggestion would be, Laura, I just saw your hand go up and I'll come to you in a second. My suggestion would be, let's have the meeting with the select board. Kathy, I think the school committee should be invited as well. And if there's any other, Andrew, if you think you want to include advisory, let's just see where everyone else is at, see if there's other ideas that come up and use that as an opportunity to decide where we want to go, and how we're going to listen.
So you guys will need to post tomorrow morning if you're listening, if the chairs are here, to be able to do this on Tuesday.
Okay. Laura, do you want to add anything before we adjourn? I gotta give you access to talk. There you go. You should be good.
Great. Yeah, I would just like to add something. I think to the point that was just made about the survey, I think for people who were in opposition to this, a survey might come off as dismissive. Obviously, people had a lot to say about this project. And while I fully get that participation leading up to this vote was very low. I mean, trust me, I sat in an auditorium with 5 people for that educational presentation, which was wonderful, by the way. I took a lot away from that. And it really, changed my mind and the way that I was thinking about things. I think pre-project and pre-voting, you might have seen a low turnout, but I feel like people who have strong opinions about this and voted no, if something else is going to be proposed or another project or the same project, I think you probably would see much more engagement this time.
Thanks, Laura. All right, I see a few other hands up, but I'm going to call it at this point, unless anyone else wants to continue on this, because I think we're gonna have another opportunity for this on Tuesday.
There's just two more. Let's hear, Jason.
All right, we'll
I
go
think
two
it's
more.
ideas
All
that
right, so
well
Kate,
said,
then Ashley.
and then be done.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this evening. It was an eye opener. My name is Kate Carol Noak. I'm at 12 Powder Mill Lane. And I was involved with the Northborough Southborough PAC, Parent Advisory Council, Special Education for probably about 15 years. And I chaired the PAC for about 5. And I know my way around a curriculum review committee. I know all of, I've spent a lot of time in education. The one thing that I would suggest going on, a lot of other points have been made that I was going to make, but this is the one point that I haven't heard is accessibility. And that's in terms of the jargon that I've heard being used. I don't think a lot of people really understand what you're talking about, the learning neighborhoods, et cetera, et cetera. I think if you could take the examples from, say, a school like Woodward or a school, like Trottier, and talk about what you do there and what you cannot do at Neary right now and would like to do, and how you'd like to see things happen for students. I think that might be, I think people kind of switch off because they don't understand what you're talking about. I did listen to the educational component. I thought it was excellent. I understood it, but I'm not sure that a lot of other people would if they hadn't spent a lot of time learning about curriculum and instruction and understanding differentiation. So that is just the one point I wanted to bring up. I think this conversation is fantastic. People are truly getting their points across. I'm really seeing a lot of the benefits that I didn't see before, and I think it just might be helpful.
Great, thanks, Kate.
You're welcome.
Ashley?
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Hi, guys. It's Ashley Kerwin. I'm over on Pine Hill Road. I wanted to chime in and first say thank you so much for all the time and effort that you guys have put forth with this, especially given the fact that you have reviewed so many different options and you did come to the community with what was considered the best option. And in my mind, I'm a misplaced person in Massachusetts because I'm not from here and I have no family here. And when we moved here 7 years ago from the DC area, we looked all over the state in terms of looking at towns as to where to buy a house. And we strictly bought in Southborough based on the school system and the education that we wanted our kids who, even if the new Neary plan was approved as is, maybe only one of two of my kids would benefit from it for about a year. But I think it's the right thing to do. And I was a yes voter on the Saturday town meeting. My husband was a yes voter at the Saturday town meeting. And what I think, and talking in my circle of people that I know here in Southborough, is that a lot of people were confused that they had to either be at the town meeting and stay for an undetermined amount of time before a vote was called. And then they're like, okay, well, if I went on Saturday, do I have to vote on Tuesday? So I think there's a lot of miscommunication going on with driving people to the meetings, with driving people to the polls. And then even at the Saturday meeting, and I've done large scale events all the way up to like bringing in 70,000 people into different venues. And the way that we decided to do a town meeting and vote on $108 million project by a show of hands, I am unclear as to how many people actually voted, because I know we had 1,171 people attend the meeting, but did all 1,171 people actually vote? Or did 900 people get a chance to vote because we lost people because they couldn't just stay for hours upon hours upon hours? So I do think you probably lose a lot of people that are maybe vested in it and who would have a voice, but they couldn't do things. And then my husband had to fly out of town on Tuesday, so he was not able to vote, and he didn't know prior to that that he was going to be out of town. So I do think there is some way to get more engagement from the community, but we just have to look at that as well. And my only other thing would be saying that I think, and it's unfortunate, I think bringing this up in the climate that we're in right now is really tough for people. And so I do think that maybe the school is getting lost in all the other things that are pulling at people's pocketbooks. So that's really all I have to say about it. I think having a new school on the same location that it's currently in, it should be fine. I am with Andrew and saying if it's okay for my kids to play their recreational sports on these fields, then why wouldn't it be okay for them to then go into a school, especially a new school that is going to be up to code with all of the things that were being presented with it. So just know that we really appreciate all that you guys have done. We look forward to continuing to support the NBC and support our kids and our teachers and our community. And just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. All right, is there any other business from the committee tonight? All right, seeing none, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Andrew?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Denise?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Roger?
Aye.
And I am I as well. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.